Her mother-in-law burned her bridal clothes, leaving her with nothing but ashes and broken dreams. But what happened next will shock you. From the flames of betrayal rose a gown of power that changed her life forever. You won't believe how she turned destruction into unstoppable strength. The sun rose bright over Kasira, and the village danced with joy. Zalia, soft-spoken and graceful, was finally marrying Lemtu, the son of a powerful cocoa trader. Her father, Bajuno, smiled with pride. Though poor, he had raised her with love, and today was supposed to be her happiest moment. The compound buzzed with music, colors, and laughter. Neighbors wore their best wrappers, children ran with flowers, and Zalia sat in her hut, wrapped in her bridal robe, waiting for her gown. It wasn't just any gown. It was white and gold, hand-sewn by her late mother, every stitch filled with memory and meaning. But not everyone celebrated. Mafuno, Lemtu's mother, stood at the edge of the compound, arms folded. She didn't want a quiet village girl as a daughter-in-law. She had dreams of Lemtu marrying into wealth, someone with polished shoes and a city tongue. Zalia reminded her of mud huts and poverty, things she thought her family had escaped. Mafuno hid her bitterness behind forced smiles, but inside, she plotted to stop this wedding forever. As the guests moved toward the village altar for the ceremony, Mafuno stayed behind. She walked slowly into Zalia's hut, carrying a clay pot filled with thick oil and a smoldering flame. The bridal gown lay on a wooden stool, ready for the moment Zalia would become a bride. Mafuno stared at it, disgusted. "This gown is a joke," she muttered. "Let's see how she marries in ashes." Without hesitation, she poured the oil over the delicate fabric and dropped the flame. The fire swallowed the gown in seconds. Gold turned black. The lace curled and cracked. The hut filled with smoke. Mafuno calmly stepped out and returned to the ceremony with her face calm, pretending nothing happened. Zalia came back moments later, humming softly, ready to dress. But when she stepped inside the hut, her breath caught. The smell hit first, then the smoke, then the black pile on the floor where her gown had once lay. Her heart shattered. She fell to her knees, crying out, clutching the ashes in her hands. The wedding drums slowed. Word spread. Villagers rushed over. Mafuno arrived, gasping, acting shocked. "She burned it herself," she declared. "She doesn't want to marry my son." Her voice rose in fake outrage. "She's mocking our family." The guests murmured in confusion. Lemtu stood frozen. His silence was a knife. Zalia looked up at him, eyes full of pain, waiting for him to defend her. But Lemtu said nothing, not one word. And just like that, the celebration ended. The music stopped. The dancers scattered. Zalia was blamed, disgraced, humiliated. Bajuno tried to speak, but Mafuno shut him down. The elders said there could be no wedding without a gown. Tradition had been broken. Zalia stood alone, ash covering her hands, her future in ruins. Her voice was low but steady as she said, "This was your fire, but I will rise from it." And she walked out, head high, barefoot, broken, but not defeated. Zalia dropped to the ground, her scream slicing through the air. The sight of her gown, the one sewn with love by her late mother, now nothing but black ash, crushed her. Her hands trembled as she reached for what remained, but there was nothing to hold, just burnt fabric and smoke curling into the sky. Her heart beat like a drum, not from joy but from pain. This was meant to be the beginning of her new life. Instead, it felt like the end. The smell of smoke drifted through the compound, catching the attention of the villagers. One by one, they turned back from the ceremony ground, confused. Something was wrong. When they arrived at the hut, they saw Zalia on the floor, clutching ashes, her face streaked with tears. The bridal stool was burned, the walls blackened with soot. Murmurs spread. What had happened? Then Mafuno stepped forward, her voice sharp and cold. "She burned it herself," she said, pointing at Zalia. "She doesn't want to marry my son. This is how she insults us." Her words struck like thunder. The guests gasped. Mafuno continued, her eyes hard. "She waited for the right moment to embarrass our family. Who destroys a gown on their wedding day? Unless they never wanted the wedding at all." Zalia looked up, eyes wide with shock. "No," she said, barely able to speak. "I didn't do this. But Mafuno interrupted, raising her voice over Zalia's. "She's lying. This is not a girl fit to be a wife. She's disgraceful. Look at her." All eyes turned to Lemtu, waiting. He was the groom. His voice could change everything. Zalia looked at him too, silently begging him to speak. Just one word to say he believed her, one word to stand against the lie. But Lemtu stood still. His eyes darted between his mother and Zalia. Then he looked down, said nothing, not a word. Silence fell like a stone. The village elder stepped forward, his face grim. If the bride destroys her gown, the marriage cannot continue. It is a sign. We cannot bless this union. Zalia's lips parted, but no sound came. She was too stunned to cry again. Around her, the guests whispered. Some believed Mafuno, some doubted, but no one spoke for Zalia. Her father, Bajuno, clenched his fists, but he was outnumbered, outvoiced. He could only pull his daughter gently to her feet. The music stopped, the flowers dropped, the drums fell silent. Just hours ago, Zalia was about to become a wife. Now she stood in front of the altar, covered in soot and shame, the ceremony ruined. Mafuno turned and walked away, satisfied. Lemtu followed quietly. The villagers scattered, shaking their heads. But Zalia stood there, staring at the altar, where her future had just turned to ash. Her voice was low, but firm. You burned my gown, but not my spirit. She didn't cry again. She didn't chase after Lemtu. She simply turned and walked away, barefoot and strong, leaving behind smoke, silence, and a promise that her story was far from over. Zalia stood at the edge of the compound, surrounded by whispers and cruel stares. Her father, Bajuno, tried to hold her hand, but he was weak, his body bent with age and illness. He wanted to speak for her, to fight back, but Mafuno stood tall and fierce, her voice louder than his strength. "If you say one word, old man," Mafuno warned, "I will see you thrown out too." Bajuno's lips tightened. He lowered his head. His silence broke Zalia's heart more than the fire ever could. Mafuno turned to the crowd, raising her voice so all could hear. "She has shamed us, burned her own gown, disrespected our family. She cannot stay here another minute." The villagers, confused but afraid to oppose Mafuno, stepped aside. A path opened. Zalia stood in the center, barefoot, ash on her skin, eyes red. She had nothing but a small cloth bundle. Inside it, a needle kit, a few threads, and the wrapper tied around her waist. No shoes, no food, no place to go. "Leave!" Mafuno shouted, pointing beyond the compound gates. "You don't belong here!" Zalia didn't move. "Go!" Mafuno barked again. Still, Zalia stood, her hands clenched at her sides, her breath shaky but steady. Then Mafuno gave a final blow. "Without that gown, you are nothing. Just a girl with dreams and dirt. You'll never wear white again." Zalia looked up, her voice trembling but clear. "Then I'll make a new gown, but not for you." The air shifted. Mafuno froze. For a moment, there was silence. Then Zalia turned and walked, slowly, but with purpose, through the gate. No one helped her. No one stopped her. The villagers watched, some curious, some ashamed. She didn't cry, not this time. Her tears had dried in the smoke. Her feet hit the dusty path, firm with each step. Her father reached out weakly, but she only gave him a small nod. She wanted him to stay safe, to live. She would carry the shame for both of them. Behind her, Mafuno smirked, proud of her victory. She thought she had broken the girl. She didn't know Zalia still held the one thing she couldn't burn: hope. Zalia walked until the compound disappeared behind her. The road ahead was long and unknown, but she walked anyway. Her hands itched to sew. Her heart burned not with pain, but with a quiet, rising fire. With every step, she whispered to herself, "I will make a gown the world cannot ignore." And though her feet bled and her stomach growled, she kept going, because somewhere deep inside, she knew this wasn't the end. It was just the thread of a new beginning. Zalia's feet ached as she stepped into Dambaro, the city of steel. Smoke curled from chimneys, wheels screeched, and metal slammed against metal. It was loud, fast, and nothing like the peaceful village of Kasira. There were no friendly greetings, no children running barefoot, no warm fires by clay huts, only strangers moving quickly, machines roaring, and the endless clang of iron. She clutched her cloth bundle tighter, feeling smaller with every step. Hungry and unsure where to sleep, she wandered until she saw a tailor's workshop. It was narrow and noisy, filled with fabric, thread spools, and sewing machines that clicked like angry beetles. Madame Rito, the owner, stood at the door with a measuring tape around her neck. She had sharp eyes and a voice like sandpaper. "What do you want?" she asked. Zalia bowed. "I'll sweep your floors. I don't need pay, just food." Madame Rito stared, then nodded once. "Start now. No talking. Zalia swept the shop every day from sunrise to nightfall. She kept her eyes down, moved quietly, and listened. The seamstresses joked, gossiped, and sometimes shouted, but Zalia remained silent. At night, when the shop closed and the others went home, she stayed behind. From the trash bin, she picked scraps of fabric, tiny pieces no one wanted. In the corner by a broken chair, she stitched by moonlight. Her fingers moved fast, guided by memories of her mother's hands. She didn't just sew, she poured her pain, her dreams, her silence into every stitch. One evening, Madame Rito returned unexpectedly to fetch a forgotten tape. She found Zalia bent over a small cloth, needle dancing in her hand, creating a delicate flower from leftover silk and lace. Madame Rito didn't speak at first. She watched quietly. Then she said, "You sew like the threads speak to you." Zalia froze. She looked up, unsure if she'd be scolded. But Madame Rito stepped closer. "Where did you learn that?" Zalia whispered. "From my mother. She taught me with love. And now, the threads know my pain." Madame Rito studied the work. The flower was perfect, smooth, alive. She said nothing else that night, just turned and left. But the next morning, she handed Zalia a needle set and a better seat near the window. "Don't just sweep," she said. "Help with simple hems." Zalia bowed deeply, hiding the smile that bloomed on her face. The city was still hard, still loud, but something had changed. In that small workshop of steel and thread, a seed had been planted. Zalia had come with nothing, but her hands, her pain, and her quiet fire had begun to open a new door, and the gown she once lost. In her heart, a new one was being sewn, not of gold and white, but of courage, thread by thread. Zalia's days were filled with thread, fabric, and focus. She no longer swept floors. She stitched, she cut, she imagined. Her dresses weren't made with fancy materials. They were born from scraps, rejected cloth, and cast-offs. Yet, when she pieced them together, they became something special. People started noticing. At first, it was the tea seller's daughter who wore one to a neighbor's wedding. The guests couldn't stop whispering. "Where did you get this dress?" they asked. "Who made it?" Next, a local singer stopped by the workshop. She had seen the tea seller's dress and asked Zalia to make her something bold for an upcoming concert. Zalia hesitated but nodded. For 2 nights, she worked silently, sewing colors into rhythms, pain into pattern. When the singer walked on stage in that dress, deep blue with silver edges and a high collar, the crowd cheered louder than ever. The dress danced with her, shimmered in the light, and moved like it had a soul. After that night, orders started trickling in. A city lawyer came in, asking for a suit that made her feel like power itself. Zalia listened, designed, and stitched a sharp, burgundy set with gold threading hidden in the lining. The lawyer wore it to court. She won her case and returned with 2 more clients. By the 3rd month, whispers had turned into questions. Who is this mystery tailor? Where is she from? Is she trained in Europe? But no one knew. Zalia stayed quiet. She let her work speak. With Madame Rito's blessing, she took a small back room and turned it into her own corner. She painted one word above the doorway, Ashe. It was from her village's old tongue, meaning from ashes. The name spread fast. Ashe designs became the talk of Damboro. People said she stitched stories into clothes, that her gowns healed heartbreak, that her suits gave confidence. They weren't just garments, they were power. Still, Zalia kept her head low. She remembered Mafuno's voice, the burning dress, the shame, but each new creation helped stitch up those wounds. Each smile from a client added strength to her spine. Then, one rainy morning, as she adjusted fabric on a mannequin, the workshop bell rang softly. A quiet woman in black entered. She had no jewelry, no makeup, just poise and sharp eyes. Zalia greeted her and asked, "How may I help you?" The woman looked around and finally said, "They say you sew miracles. I don't need a miracle, I need truth." Zalia didn't answer right away. She simply nodded. The woman handed her a card. "I'm the personal assistant to Chief Bulow's wife. She saw one of your designs and wants something for the National Gala next month." Zalia's hands trembled slightly as she held the card. The gala was the biggest event in the country, and now, her name was being whispered in the same breath as royalty, from scraps, from pain, from fire. Ashe Designs had risen from the ashes, just like the girl who started it. Zalia stood in the workshop staring at the card the woman had left behind. She still didn't know her name, just that she wanted a gown, not for beauty, not for luxury, but for power. "Design me a gown that speaks power without words," she had said. No instructions, no colors, no fabric request, just a challenge. Zalia took it to heart. That same night, she cleared her table and sat with a blank piece of paper. Nothing came at first, but then she remembered the fire, the bridal gown her mother had sewn, now turned to ash, the shame she had walked through, the silence of Lemtu, the words of Mafuno, and from that memory came a design. She worked like someone possessed. Her fingers moved without pause. She didn't eat much, didn't sleep at all. She layered the gown with meaning, each stitch a memory, each fold a whisper of the pain she had buried deep. The base was indigo, dark and calm like the night sky before a storm. The sleeves spread like eagle wings, bold and wide, and on the back, golden threads shaped like dancing flames. It was the fire, but not the one that destroyed. It was the one that rebirthed. Zalia didn't try the gown on anyone. She didn't show Madame Rito. She wrapped it carefully and waited. On the 7th morning, the woman returned. Still no makeup, still no jewelry. She didn't ask questions. She took the gown, nodded once, and left. Zalia felt hollow after she left, unsure if the design would ever be seen again. Days passed quietly. She went back to making smaller dresses. Then, on the 3rd day, everything changed. The city of Dambaro buzzed with excitement. Every screen in every corner shop, mall, cafe, and bar was turned on. It was the National Charity Gala, an event where the Queen herself was expected to speak. Zalia wasn't watching until Madame Rito shouted from the front, "Zalia, come quickly!" She ran to the window where a small crowd had gathered around a screen, and there she saw her. The Queen of Dambaro stood on the red carpet, graceful and tall, but it was the gown that silenced the city. Deep indigo, wings stretched across her arms, golden flames burning boldly down her back. The same gown, Zalia's. Reporters rushed toward the Queen. "Your Majesty, who designed your gown?" She only smiled and said, "A girl who understands strength." Zalia gasped. People turned to look at her. Some recognized the design style. Whispers began again, but louder this time, louder than ever. Zalia walked back into the workshop slowly, her heart pounding. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat and breathed deeply. She had once been cast out with nothing. Now the Queen wore her truth on national screen. No more Ashe. No more shame. This was her moment, and the gown had spoken exactly what needed to be said, without a single word. The city of Dambaro had never seen such excitement. Billboards lit up, invitations were sent out across the nation, and news anchors spoke with wide eyes. The Queen was hosting the Royal Fashion Ball, the first in 50 years. It wasn't just a glamorous event. It was a celebration of talent, strength, and transformation. And at the center of it all was one name whispered everywhere: Zalia. Zalia couldn't believe it when the invitation arrived, stamped with the royal crest, sealed with gold. She had been personally chosen to showcase her designs at the palace. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Madame Rito wept with joy. From a girl who once swept her floors to a designer entering the royal gates, Zalia had come so far. She didn't sleep much in the days that followed. Every detail had to be perfect. She designed 5 gowns, each representing a part of her journey. Each one spoke louder than words. The first gown was fire, bright crimson and orange, with layered flames embroidered from shoulder to hem, symbolizing the blaze that once took everything from her. The second was air, light, flowing silk in shades of sky and mist, representing the freedom she found in the city. The third was metal, sharp, silver, and structured, echoing the machines of Dambaro and the strength she built in herself. The fourth was sand, warm gold and bronze, textured like the earth, showing how she rebuilt her life from the ground up. And the last was soul, deep blue with glowing threads, soft and radiant, showing the inner peace and courage she had found. The palace courtyard was transformed into a glowing runway. Famous designers, politicians, artists, and even royals gathered in their finest clothes. But when Zalia stepped onto the runway with her models, silence swept over the crowd. She didn't need to speak. The gowns told her story. Each step the models took felt like thunder. The fire dress blazed under the lights. The air gown danced with the breeze. The metal one shimmered with power. The sand dress whispered of survival. And the soul gown glowed like a dream reborn. When the final model reached the end, the entire audience stood up. Applause erupted. Cheers filled the air. Even the queen smiled, her eyes shining. Beside her, the Minister of Culture leaned in and said softly, "We must make her our official advisor." Later that night, Zalia was called to the palace chambers. The queen stood before her and said, "You've turned pain into power. From today, you are not just a tailor. You are the palace designer of Damboro." Zalia bowed, tears in her eyes. She thought of the ashes, the humiliation, the day she left her village with nothing but a wrapper and a needle. And now she stood in a royal hall, her name etched into history. She didn't need revenge. She didn't need to shout. Her work had spoken, and the world had listened. Zalia didn't let fame change her heart. After becoming the official palace designer, she used her success not to boast, but to build. She remembered what it felt like to sleep hungry, to be rejected, to start with nothing but fabric scraps and pain. So instead of sitting in comfort, she walked back into the streets, the same ones she once swept, and found girls like she once was. Lost, abandoned, broken, but full of hidden talent. She opened her first fashion school in a quiet corner of Damboro. No golden gates, no special rules, just a wide open door and a sign that read, "Ashe Academy, from ashes to art." Girls from the streets came hesitantly, holding nothing but their hope. Zalia gave them needles, fabric, and courage. She didn't just teach them how to stitch clothes. She taught them how to stitch dignity, pride, and power into every design. Soon, her academy became a home. Young girls who were once beggars became designers. Runaways became role models. Zalia trained them, fed them, sheltered them, and showed them a future brighter than they had ever imagined. She never shouted her story. She never wore her titles loudly. Whenever someone asked, "How did you become so great?" she would smile gently and say, "A woman once burned my past, so I stitched my future." Word of her academy spread quickly. More schools opened across the city, then across the country. Zalia wasn't just making clothes anymore. She was shaping lives. Her students began showcasing their designs at city markets, then national events, then fashion weeks across Africa. And everywhere they went, they carried Zalia's name with pride. Countries began to honor her, from Kenya to Ghana, from South Africa to Morocco. Governments invited her, awarded her, and celebrated her. Presidents shook her hand. Queens hugged her. But Zalia remained the same woman who once cried beside burning fabric. She wore simple clothes, walked with humble steps, and always lifted others with her. She refused to open a store in her village, but she built a training center there. She wanted the young girls of her hometown to see a different path, to feel hope instead of shame. Even Mafuno, who once threw her out, heard Zalia's name on every radio, in every headline. She had become a legend, without revenge, without shouting, without looking back. Zalia proved that true power doesn't come from position or pride. It comes from purpose. She used thread and cloth to write her story, and the world read it with awe. She became a voice for women across Africa, not by talking, but by doing. In the world of fashion, she wasn't just a name. She was a movement, a force, a light, and all it started with was a burned gown, a needle, and a girl who refused to give up. 3 years had passed since Zalia had left Kasira, heartbroken and alone. Now, she returned not as the quiet, timid girl they once knew, but as a woman transformed by strength, success, and grace. Her arrival was unlike anything the village had ever seen. A convoy of royal guards marched behind her, their polished armor gleaming under the sun. Assistants and reporters followed closely, cameras flashing and microphones ready, capturing every moment of her triumphant homecoming. Zalia stepped out of the sleek car wearing a golden gown that shimmered like the first light of dawn. The fabric caught every ray of the sun and turned it into a dance of light, announcing to everyone that this was no ordinary visitor. Her presence commanded attention and respect, and the villagers who once whispered cruel words and turned their backs now watched in awe and disbelief. The same people who had mocked her, who had laughed at her misfortune, now bowed low in front of her, their eyes filled with a mixture of shame and admiration. They whispered her name, Zalia, the girl who rose from ashes to become a queen of fashion and hope. Mothers pointed at their children, telling them to remember her story. The pride of Kasira had returned. Zalia walked calmly through the village, every step steady and filled with purpose. Her heart was steady too, though memories of her painful past flashed in her mind like old wounds. But today was not a day for anger or revenge. It was a day to show what true power looked like: grace, forgiveness, and the courage to face the past without fear. She stopped in front of the old compound where she had been cast out. The house looked the same, but the air around it was different now, charged with silence and anticipation. She asked quietly, almost softly, "May I visit inside?" The head of the village, a man who once ignored her plight, nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. As she stepped into the compound, she felt the weight of many eyes watching her every move. She saw the faded walls where she had once dreamed, the dusty corners where her bridal gown had burned to ashes. But now, those ashes were not symbols of defeat. They were the foundation of her rise. Zalia's gaze met Mafuno's, the woman who had tried to destroy her. Mafuno lowered her eyes, unable to meet the proud woman before her. The crowd held its breath, waiting for a sign of forgiveness or anger. Zalia did neither. Instead, she smiled gently and said, "I came back not for revenge, but to show that fire cannot destroy what's meant to shine." Her words spread like wildfire through the village, healing old wounds and inspiring new hope. She stayed only a short time, visiting the places that once held her pain, but now stood witness to her triumph. When she left Kasira, it was clear that the girl who was once burned down was now the woman who rebuilt, and she carried her village's future with her. The return to Ashes wasn't an end. It was the brightest, new beginning. Mafuno's life had fallen apart. Her once thriving business, built on pride and connections, now lay in ruins. Customers stopped coming, deals failed, and debts piled up. The man she had hoped would carry her name and wealth forward, Lemtu, had left the country. He moved far away, seeking a new life where no one remembered the scandal or the burned bride. No letters, no calls, just silence. Mafuno was left alone, her power and pride shattered. When news spread that Zalia had returned to Kasira with a grand convoy and the respect of royalty, many villagers were shocked. They whispered about the girl who had been chased away in ashes now shining brighter than the sun. But Mafuno, she faced a storm of shame that no one could hide from. One afternoon, when Zalia came back to the village again, she found Mafuno sitting quietly outside the broken compound. The once proud woman looked small and fragile, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't speak at first. She only looked up at Zalia with eyes full of regret and sorrow. "I was wrong," Mafuno finally whispered, her voice breaking. "I judged you, I hurt you, and I lost everything because of my hate." Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of deep remorse. Zalia studied Mafuno carefully. She could feel the pain and the lessons hidden behind those tears, but she did not respond with anger or revenge. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a carefully wrapped parcel. Slowly, Zalia handed the package to Mafuno. Mafuno's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon and lifted the cloth. Inside was a gown, simple but elegant. The fabric was soft, flowing gently in the light breeze. Embroidered on it were delicate flame patterns, quiet but powerful, like the fire that had once tried to destroy Zalia, but only made her stronger. Zalia looked into Mafuno's eyes and said softly, "Wear this to remember that ashes don't end a woman. They ignite her. From destruction, we rise. From hate, we grow stronger." Mafuno nodded slowly, her tears now mixed with respect. She understood the message. No matter how deep the hurt, true strength comes from rising above it. She was kneeling, not in defeat, but in acknowledgement of Zalia's courage and power. Nearby, cameras from the reporters followed every moment. The world watched as Mafuno knelt before the woman she had once scorned and destroyed. The scene spread quickly across social media and news channels. People everywhere were inspired by this powerful moment, how hate and cruelty tried to burn someone down, but instead gave her the fuel to become unstoppable. Zalia's story became a message to millions. What others burn in hate, you can rebuild with power. Never let ashes define your worth or end your story. Sometimes, the fire that tries to break you becomes the flame that lights your way forward. And so, the girl who had been rejected and humiliated rose higher than anyone could imagine. Her kindness and strength turned enemies into witnesses of her greatness. Mafuno's kneeling was not just a moment of defeat. It was a symbol that even the darkest hate cannot stop a heart that chooses to rise. This was the final proof. Ashes are not the end. They are the beginning of something greater. If this story touched your heart and showed you the true power of rising from pain and betrayal, remember, no matter what life throws at you, you can rebuild yourself stronger than before. Just like Zalia, who turned ashes into a flame that lit up her whole world, you too have the strength inside you to overcome every challenge. Never let anyone's hate or cruelty define who you are or stop your dreams. Your past does not control your future. Please take a moment to like this video if it inspired you. Your support helps us bring more stories like this. Stories that heal, empower, and change lives. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more amazing tales that remind us all of the strength inside every one of us. Thank you so much for watching. Together, let's spread hope and show the world that even from the darkest ashes, a bright future can be born. Stay strong, stay hopeful, and remember, your story is just beginning.